Hey everybody, Mark Dawes here, and in this short video I want to talk to you about supervision and in particular instructor to student ratio numbers. Now this is one of the most common questions I get asked all the time, and the reason I'm actually doing this video is I got an email this morning asking me the very same question, and I get asked it on every course I do, whether it's an instructor course or a refresher course. I get phone calls about this and emails about it. And the question specifically is, how many instructors should I have when teaching a physical skills course in relation to the number of students that I'm training? And the answer to that is, there is no set criteria. There is no law that says you must have X number of instructors for X number of students. But there are a lot of variables you need to take in place. And the reason this is important is it's estimated that 80% of all claims for negligence in the sporting category, and that's the closest category we can get to with regards to what we're teaching occupationally, is because either equipment has failed or instructors have been lax and slack in their supervision. Now, it also goes on to answer another question, which is, should the instructors, additional instructors, hold the same qualification and competencies as the main instructor on the course? The answer to that is absolutely, because an instructor or a supervisor has got to be seen to be delivering a reasonable duty of care, and therefore the reasonable duty of care must be to the standards expected by, this is what's laid down, the standards expected by a competent instructor. And a competent instructor may be someone with experience, the same qualifications or whatever. And again, you'd have to take legal advice on this on a case-by-case basis, because it would be for a court to decide. But let's go back to the basics. How many instructors should I have per number of students? Well, there's various guidelines out there, and again, if you belong to a particular sporting club, a sporting organisation, go in and ask for their policy and procedure on this. So, for example, in one sporting area, they say you should have 1 instructor to 8. In another sporting discipline, they say 1 to 12, then 1 to 16. And in physical restraint and self-defence, the only one that's really laid out is the one for the security industry organisation, where the SI have said you must have 1 instructor to 12 students. So if you're teaching physical intervention, 1 instructor to 12 students. But we need to look at this in a lot more sophisticated way, really, because it's not just about 1 instructor to 12 students. What if you've got a newly qualified instructor that's not used to actually dealing with students, that they haven't done it before? You may want 2 instructors there. What if you've got lots of paperwork to do in addition to actually delivering the physical skills side? Well, you might want 2 or 3 instructors there. And to give you an example, when we as a company run a course, if we have 30 learners on that course taking multiple awards, we will have a minimum of 5 trainers there. So we run a 1 to sort of 6 ratio for instructor to learner. But that's important because we're teaching them to do a skill that carries a higher degree of risk with it. Now, also, when bearing this in mind, when teaching physical skills, you have to think about the fact that most injuries are caused by slips, trips and falls, which are the result of improper footwear, improper clothing, poor flooring, spillages, etc., etc. So it's not only about making sure the person can do what you're teaching them, it's also making sure that they can do it safely. And when they're working and interacting as a group or as a team, and they're learning to physically control someone or defend themselves to someone where there's dynamic movement about, you're going to need more than 1 instructor to oversee that, generally speaking. Now, the key to this comes under the Health and Safety at Work Act, particularly Section 2, brackets 2, which talks about information, instruction, training and supervision. And the key that will underpin that will be your assessment of risk. So your risk assessment, as a coach teaching physical skills, you should identify those things within the skill you're teaching that's going to cause risk, and then put control measures in place to actually reduce or eliminate the risk. So if you've got, let's say, 30 people in a gym and they're all going to be moving around doing different dynamics, it's obviously going to be very hard for 1 trainer to actually supervise all of those people safely. In fact, it's nigh on impossible. And here's the rub. If someone fell over, so I'm looking at you over here, and someone fell over there, and I wasn't supervising over there, then potentially I'm negligent for not extending a duty of care and keeping an eye on someone who is under my supervision. So we would want a number of trainers placed around the gym. Now, the reason I'm answering this question on camera is the email I got this morning actually said, Mark, I've turned up to do a course and I've got 63 learners here, all waiting to do physical skills training, and there's me and 2 other trainers. Now, for me, if that can be managed properly, that's fine. You know, it depends on what you're doing, how big the environment is. That's another factor. 63 people, if you're doing physical skills, you want a big gym type area, I would have thought. Depends on all those factors. It depends on how qualified and how skilled, have they done it before, etc., etc. But generally speaking, that's a lot of learners for 3 trainers. So I personally wouldn't run that. I wouldn't do that. I'd have at least 6 or maybe 10 trainers there minimum for that number of learners, because there's too many avenues, there's too many opportunities there for negligence to occur. Now, when we're talking about negligence, which is the most common thing that people get sued for when it comes to lack of supervision, we come down to the duty of care principle. And that comes down to the neighbour principle, and it fundamentally says that you have a duty of care to your neighbour, and law defines someone your neighbour as someone who's going to be so closely affected by what you do or don't do that you must have that in your mind in contemplation at all times. So when we apply that principle to physical skills training, what we're saying is, if I'm teaching you, you're my neighbour, and if I've got 4 or 5 or 10 other people there, they're my neighbours, I must have at the forefront of my mind their health and safety and well-being at all times when we're undertaking physical skills training. And that means we have to plan. We have to look at the foreseeable risk. What's the chance of them slipping? What's the chance of them falling, bumping into each other? If we're going to do pressurized and dynamic training, that again increases the risks. You probably need more supervision there. So what I would do is I would go back to your risk assessment. I would look at all the variables, look at the level of people who you're training, whether they're novices, whether they've done it before, and then from there work out how many trainers you need. But if you need any more help on this, drop me a line. But as an average, and this is our sort of policy and procedure on this, we actually run all physical skills training courses with a minimum of 2. If we have a very low number group and a very experienced trainer, say for example 6 learners, we'll run that, we may run that with 1 trainer, depends how much paperwork they've got to do, but generally speaking we run all physical skills training courses with 2 trainers, up to 12 people. If we go beyond 12 people, up to say 15 or 18 people, then we'll have 3 trainers. If we're going to get to 20, we'll have 4 trainers, and so on. Because in my mind I know that 80% of all claims for negligence are down to lack of supervision. They're down to someone being hurt because the coach or the trainer wasn't paying attention, wasn't looking after them. So that's something to bear in mind. If you'd like any help on this, drop me an email, leave a comment below the video. Please feel free to share. I hope that helps. And if you have any questions, leave a comment, drop me an email. Happy to help. Thanks ever so much.